Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Literacy View. We have a very special episode today. We have special guest, Dr. Shawn Datchuk, and he is the new director of the Iowa Reading Research Center. And we're so happy to have him join us here today. Let me tell you a little bit about Shawn. He is a faculty member in the University of Iowa College of Education. Under his direction, Shawn aims to ensure that IRRC's efforts make it easier for teachers to teach reading and make it easier for students to learn how to read and use reading to learn. He works with IRRC staff and college faculty to achieve these aims by conducting research, providing technical assistance to schools, and translating research findings for teachers and caregivers. As a former K-12 special ed teacher, elementary teacher, director of special education, and academic performance director, he believes all students should have access to high-quality literacy instruction. He received his master's and doctor of philosophy in special education from Pennsylvania State University. And we are going to be talking about his newest blog, Handwriting, Beneficial to Reading and Often Misunderstood. So we're going to get started with just some thoughts about Shawn's background, because we discovered through some conversations that Shawn is a Brooklynite.
I am, right? Yeah. So it's so wonderful. Thank you, Faith and Judy. I'm not sure if people say this anymore, but long-time listener, first-time caller on my end. But yeah, it's true. I grew up in Brooklyn, Bensonhurst, right off of on 85th Street, right by 85th, 18th Avenue. And my mom's family and my mom immigrated from China in 1970, and then so she attended high school there. My mom's whole side of my mom's family still lives over in Brooklyn. So my Brooklyn roots run deep. I have nothing but love for Brooklyn out there.
Well, we're sharing the love with you, Shawn, because we love Brooklyn, and you could take the girl out of Brooklyn, but Brooklyn populates the world. So anyhow, we'll get started. Oh, and one point, Shawn, just to bring up, you mentioned 85th Street.
Yeah.
So I think I told you my grandparents lived on 83rd Street and Bay
Oh,
Park.
right. Yeah.
So really cool. So we have a deep connection to start. And right. I think Judy does also, right, Judy?
Faith, we have 3 Brooklynites on this episode. I think that this is a first.
Probably because we had other New Yorkers, but I'm not sure they were true Brooklynites growing up in Brooklyn.
So I was born and raised in Brooklyn. I'm in Connecticut now. Faith was born and raised in Brooklyn. And Shawn, interestingly enough, you mentioned 18th Avenue. I have a soft spot for 18th Avenue and Brooklyn because I taught for 15 years in District 20 in Brooklyn, New York on 18th Avenue.
Oh, wonderful.
Yes,
I went
PS 48.
Oh, okay. I went to PS 200. I think it was the same district.
My mom worked there for a while.
Oh, really? Oh, wow.
Well, we're feeling the loves. All right, let's get on with it. So, Shawn, you wrote a great article about handwriting, and it's a hot topic now because it was really ignored for so long, for so many years. And one thing you mentioned in your article, I'm going to take it right out from the article, is indeed, research suggests a close link between writing and reading overall, including a strong relationship between the development of early writing and reading skills, such as spelling and word reading. And that was a quote from Kim et al. 2024. And I think, is that young Kim?
Yeah, Young Suk Kim, correct.
Woo! Because she is going to be a future guest of ours coming up probably in the next few weeks. So this is great that
I'm in illustrious company already between Faith and Judy, and then if I'm on a podcast that Young Suk Kim, Dr. Kim will be on, then I'm doing something right in my life.
Well, I think we're doing something right because we have the best researchers on the Literacy View. And
Woohoo!
I'm very, very proud that Judy is as well. So could you talk a little bit about that quote that you pulled?
Yeah, I would be happy to. So I think that so I'm a former K-12 special education teacher, elementary teacher. Thank you so much for that very kind introduction. But what I saw as a teacher, and then now my time as a faculty member, is that there's the old saying, reading, writing, arithmetic, and that writing is the forgotten R. Unfortunately, it's still true today. If you take a look, just informally speaking, in classrooms, we see very little particular focus on handwriting. If you take a look at national surveys conducted by different researchers, Steve Graham is on a number of these surveys. And if you take a look, the estimates on how often writing is taught tend to vary. It can be as little as 10 to 15 minutes a day, all the way up to, there's certainly the higher estimates on pushing 40 minutes. But even inside that smaller cluster, I think what we find is that the close connection between writing and reading, there's such an amazing opportunity, particularly at early elementary grades, to really draw that connection between, if you're physically making this letter, what separates that physical action of making that letter from just drawing is that drawing and handwriting, certainly lots of different physical processes tied in together, visual, motor coordination, all those things go into each other. But the thing that separates handwriting, I think, from drawing is that letter knowledge. So not only helping students memorize the letter shape, the letter formation, but just doing this additional step of also teaching them the letter name and the letter sound while you're doing it. So that wonderful article that Dr. Kim did with some colleagues, they took a look at the different relations between writing and reading. And what they found is that there is clear connection. So there's effect sizes upwards of 0.70, which is a very strong effect size, but between reading and writing. And what she found and her colleagues found is that particularly that connection's even stronger at that early elementary or beginning stages of writing. So transcription skills of handwriting and spelling tend to be closely intertwined with early reading skills. And that's not going to come as a surprise to anybody who listens to this podcast, that there's just such a clear connection between having students develop those deep cognitive skills associated with orthographic coding, of really studying and memorizing the letter shape, but then also these phonological aspects of now attaching them to names and sounds. That can only help. So when you think about it from that perspective, if we can help teachers, caregivers, I have a 2-year-old who's at a child care center during the day. If we can even help them just understand that important connection early on, I think that's really where I'm excited to help contribute to the national conversation regarding where handwriting fits into larger science of reading movements. I realize I can be long-winded, but I get really excited about this topic.
And we appreciate that. We love passion. So I'm really happy that you did talk deeply about that. Judy. So Judy Boxner, you were an early childhood teacher and reading recovery teacher, now practicing structured literacy. What do you think about handwriting and the importance of it in the early grades? I know I was first grade teacher and certainly worked with a lot of children struggling in those early grades. I'm a big proponent of handwriting. I talked about it in my books. I preach this, so I'm dying to hear what you have to say.
Yes, Shawn is on the money. I've been loving everything that Iowa does. You guys have been some of our biggest supporters, and we love you and we thank you. The best review we ever got was from the Iowa crowd of people. So, Shawn, you are on the money. Handwriting is so important. Writing instruction is so important. And unfortunately, a lot of schools are struggling with writing content, but also giving the respect and attention that handwriting instruction deserves. I do see pockets of it in schools. I see, especially with schools that are using programs like Foundations or other phonics programs, there's a lot of the skywriting and all of that. But for a lot of kids, that's not enough practice. And I think a lot of kids aren't getting enough feedback. I think a lot of teachers are very overwhelmed. I see it with the clients that I tutor after school. And I think because in this country, we've been in such a big crisis in terms of kids not being able to break the code, some schools or some teachers have prioritized teaching kids how to read. But all the research says that these processes have to happen together. And, it's unfortunate. Like, I'll work with kids that are really, really bright and they still don't know how to hold a pencil. Tons of kids that I'm seeing are doing their letters from bottom to top. And I'm trying to give them feedback, but the more years that kind of stuff continues, it becomes a habit. And habits are very hard to break. And it becomes very frustrating to kids. And I'm working with some kids that are now, end of first grade, second grade, and I'm still giving them feedback on letter formation and how to hold a pencil. I even just had a child that I was working with. I became obsessed with Leslie Lord. Has done a lot of training with me with Think SRSD. That's my passion project right now. I'm fascinated with writing instruction. And some of my kids that I work with love mechanical pencils, some like regular pencils. Some kids that were struggling feel like mechanical pencils work better for them. I had kids write essays on why a mechanical pencil versus a regular pencil and vice versa help them with handwriting instruction. But the truth of the matter is a lot of kids are really struggling, and it's not just the kids that are struggling readers. I'm seeing very advanced readers struggle with handwriting connection. And I wonder if there's a correlation with spelling, because I'm seeing a lot of kids are also having trouble with spelling words as they're writing. So I think all these pieces are connected. And I'm gonna be honest. Even in my balanced literacy reading recovery days, I did focus on handwriting instruction because I was sitting with kids one-on-one, and that was a part of the work that we were doing. But I don't think that there was enough. And I think that now with structured literacy, we have more of an opportunity to really follow a scope and sequence and really give letters and sounds and the formation of them the attention that it deserves. So I'm optimistic, but I'm also very worried with what I'm seeing in the field.
So, Shawn, in the article, you talked a little bit about letter formation and how children who have difficulty with letter formation, it's not unusual for them to struggle in, phonics and learning to read. Can you talk about that connection?
Right. Yeah. No, it is such I think an important connection, particularly for early readers or early elementary kiddos. So the there are a series of interrelated skills going on when a student is learning how to read and write. And so we can think about it from sort of, I tend to think about it in sort of these three larger buckets. And this is from the simple view of writing from Berninger and colleagues, to where we can think about a triangle, because what is special education without without a triangle? But so we at sort of one of the bases of the triangle would be transcription, and then so transcription would refer to handwriting individual letters, typing individual letters, and then spelling individual words. And what is a clear and consistent finding across decades of research is that transcription skills, you don't need to be the best speller, you don't need to be the best handwriter. Lord knows I've gotten tons of doctor's notes to where I couldn't really interpret, although that's kind of gone away with sort of the computerization. And then also typing. So spelling, you don't need to be the best speller. You don't need to be the best handwriter. You don't be the best typer. But there is a threshold that students need to cross, and that exact score can fluctuate across different samples. But there tends to be some sort of proficiency threshold that needs to happen in order for students to then draw their cognitive resources, draw attention, to devote aspects of their working memory to these juicier bits of why they're writing in the first place. So, for instance, I one of I can't tell you how many different persuasive essays I've graded as a teacher. One of my go-to writing prompts used to be, should students your age be allowed to use a cell phone in school? And it's always 99.9% of students go, yes, of course. And then there's always like this 0.01% who you could tell they just love to argue with any excuse. But if you think about it from that perspective, being able to engage in, well, what are some high quality ideas there? If you're constantly having to draw your cognitive attention to, oh, I can't really read what I wrote back, or how do I spell this word, or sort of the hunt and peck method for typing. If you're doing those sorts of things, again, there's a place for all those things, but the research is clear. There tends to be a strong correlation, predictive correlation between students' transcription skills, handwriting, spelling, typing, and their ability to not only generate writing output, so to get words on the paper, but also to write complete sentences, and then to write these sort of the 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 juicy bits of the really good ideas, the convincing ideas. We need to be able to help students draw their attention to those things and to develop automaticity with these really foundational skills.
Interesting that you use the word automaticity,
Hmm.
because I work with students who definitely, most of them have handwriting issues along with their reading issues. And I will actually work on that in intervention and have them start all over again with letter formation. Many parents wonder, why am I spending time on this? But believe it or not, they quickly move through phonics instruction when their handwriting improves. It just helps so much. So I'm glad you talked about automaticity. Judy, any thoughts about fluency with handwriting and some noticings that you've seen? Because, from, doing this for so many years, I could say with pretty much certainty that it helps, from what I've seen with my own eyes. What about you?
So I have to say, Shawn, you're a fun guy. It is amazing how fun researchers are. Faith, I think that it's the most amazing experience that these researchers are so much fun, more fun than they are in these articles. You're just amazing. You're dynamic and you're passionate. Thank you, thank you, thank you. In terms of fluency, of course it affects fluency. It and it bothers me because the demands and the rigor increases, in first grade and second grade, and especially in third grade so quickly. And I can only imagine how frustrating it is to some of the students out there that now they're being asked to write maybe a paragraph, 3 paragraphs, or they're being given sentence dictation even in first grade. And if your letter formation is struggling, that's going to definitely impact things. And the other thing that I noticed a lot of kids have trouble with is even sentence retention. When you ask them to write a sentence, a lot of kids can't even remember what you just said. They'll be like, what did you just say? So I think that there's so many important things that can happen if kids do know how to form things that will take off some of the cognitive burden, so that when they're getting their ideas down, they could focus on the other metacognitive pieces, like, okay, reading each word as I'm writing so I know what the next word is and so forth. But I think that if we neglect that critical piece of that formation and just give up on students, and I'm not saying that assistive technology doesn't have a place, because I know that a lot of learners, whether they be gifted or special need learners and so forth, benefit from assistive technology. But that also doesn't mean that we shouldn't, diminish the value of learning how to actually hold that pencil to the paper. Because I think, and I'm definitely not a researcher at all, but I think that there's research to support that there's just greater value in having that hand motor connection. Is that true, Shawn?
Yeah, so there is some compelling research out there. It's particularly done with college age students that look at their exam scores and their retention of information in classes to where they've either typed their notes or handwritten their notes. I think there are two interesting points in those series of studies. One is that students that type their notes tend to have longer notes, so they take more notes. Handwriting, they take fewer notes. However, what they've found across at least several studies is that students who handwrite their notes, even though they write less, they tend to recall the information to a greater degree, and then their exam scores tend to be higher. I think that there are several things in play there, but I think one of them could be that since we know that we can't possibly sort of keep up with somebody's speech, that we're sort of internalizing and have this inner dialogue to where we're activating aspects of our memory by that dialogue, and then we have to sort of pick and choose, so to speak, on like, okay, what part of this am I going to write down? So when you think about it from that perspective, I think not only is sort of handwriting one of the keys of how we connect our memory to the physical environment, but I think there's also something to be said for just that deep cognition that's happening when you engage in handwriting. I think that one of the reasons why, my mom lived in Brooklyn for a very long time. Now she lives outside of Cleveland. But when I send my mother a birthday card, you better be sure I handwrite that card. I don't type something and then shoot an email to her. And I think one of the reasons why we hold like that handwriting to such a, I don't know, like there's some emotional resonance with it, is because we have been processing how to write. Like if I wrote "I love you, mom," the I and the LOVE. I'm in my 40s, so that I and that L I've been shaping for 4 decades, and then so that's sort of our way of sharing our own personal sort of thumbprint with people. So I think not only is sort of those interesting studies related to handwriting, and I'm right there with you, Judy. I'm not afraid of technology. Technology's here to stay. But when you think about what place does handwriting have in the world, then I think it's not only can help us sort of process on the fly what we're seeing a little bit better than technology in some instances. Two, there tends to be sort of this emotional resonance with it that I don't think is easily captured in research studies, but that we as I think a society value just seeing somebody's handwriting.
I think people do enjoy getting a handwritten note. It's personal. And when you take the time to write it, it means something. I liked what you were saying before about how your hand can't keep up with all the thoughts in your head. So I think that pushes summarization, doesn't it? Like we're constantly having to summarize, and that's a skill, right? That's a comprehension skill. If you understand what you're hearing, that means you have to shrink it down into notes. And therefore, you must be understanding what you're doing, because otherwise you wouldn't be able to do it. And that's the difference when you type something, you're just trying to capture every word that someone else is saying. And you're mindlessly typing notes, but not necessarily absorbing it. Maybe once you get home, then you have to summarize, reread it and summarize. But if you're doing handwritten notes, you're actually summarizing while you're listening. So I think there's value in that as well. So here's my question, Shawn. What do you think about picture mnemonics? So in other words, when the letter is embedded right into the picture.
I think that there's some compelling research out there that shows that that can be an effective approach. I'm not aware of individual studies that look at like a non-mnemonic or picture versus a mnemonic picture. But I will say that approach. I'm sorry, go
Can
ahead,
you
Judy.
explain it? I'm not as familiar with that. Can you explain it a little bit more, what that's all about?
Oh, for sure. So I think the mnemonic picture that Faith is referring to would be that there are different handwriting curriculums that would, for instance, the letter S I've seen as shaped like a snake. So that way, that would theoretically make it a fun activity, particularly for early elementary kids. My sons, I have a 7 and a 2-year-old. They both love snakes. They fear them, but then they also love them. They think it's cool, I think. And then so there's an S. And then so the idea here is that it will one sort of capture students' attention. They can see the letter S. They see that it's a snake, and then it also reinforces cognitively for them that, oh, snake. So it also reinforces the letter sound. So I do see that approach is baked into many types of handwriting curriculum. I think one of the most well-researched, best handwriting curriculums is the Castle handwriting program. It was developed by Steve Graham and Karen Harris, I believe, in the early '90s. And you can still find free copies online of that. It's a PDF if you just Google CASL Castle handwriting. You'll find different PDFs. And the wonderful thing about that program is there's many wonderful things, but one is that once you download the PDF, there's a printable student workbook and then a printable teacher workbook. So with ready to go lessons there, and it takes a similar approach to where it would introduce the S with different things, and then there's just different letters that sort of follow that. I think the key idea there is that it's providing a pathway for teachers to highlight important aspects of, you aren't only teaching how to form a letter, that these letters to directly connect it to reading, you need to also, while you're teaching how to form the letter, what's the letter name and what's the letter sound. I think that any way that can happen, I think that's sort of the special sauce, so to speak, on why I think handwriting has been found to improve, not only handwriting instruction has been found to not only improve writing performance, but also these related reading skills that you mentioned earlier, Faith, including letter names, letter sounds, word reading, and then also spelling as well.
Yeah, I think that Ari did some research on the picture mnemonics, and David Kilpatrick referenced that in his book. So, and I'm a big believer in that as well for early learners. I think it really does help. So, Judy, what are some thoughts that are coming up as you're listening to these conversations? Any questions you have?
All right, Shawn. So be honest, how important is it to give corrective feedback if some kids have solidified the habit of starting their letters from bottom to top? I might be one of those people. I'm a lefty. My handwriting was never great. I really try to, think about that now. I have purchased special notebooks that actually encourage it because they have different colored lines, so the kids know, okay, don't start at this line versus that line, the blue line, the red line. How important is it, or am I just probably annoying the kid by saying start at the top, start at the top, start at the top? Do I keep saying start at the top?
I No, I love it. This is how I know I'm talking to some real life teachers here. Is that we're talking about the direction of where to start with the letter. So I'm gonna I think that particularly for older students, so once they get past K first grade, I think as a teacher, you're constantly having to think about sort of, I guess for a lack of a better term, just sort of this benefit analysis of, you're like, okay, how much time can I devote in my day to this type of feedback, and is it time to just sort of move on if it's working? I think what research suggests is that at early elementary grades, I think it is probably a good idea to provide them with those cues on where a letter should start, and then the different sequence and letter strokes. I think, however, the research starts to become a lot shakier when you get past those early elementary grades. So, in other words, if it ain't broke, don't fix it, so to speak.
Yeah,
So, if
I
it's
think you're probably right. I probably have to find a balance because I don't want it to impact the work that student is producing, and like make them hate writing and frustrate them that they don't get their ideas down on the paper at all. It's really hard. I have another question for you. So one of my buildings is implementing a phonics program next year that's going to potentially include cursive in 3rd grade. We have a lot of kids that have not cracked the code yet. So there's a real urgency to get our kids reading in 3rd grade. How important is it that we go full speed ahead with the cursive, or do we take out that portion and devote more time to breaking the code?
Yeah, that's such a great question, Judy. I think that the research is clear that the benefits that we typically see between handwriting instruction and reading tend to occur in print. So just typical print letters. And I think that the logic behind that is that if you can particularly, let's say, teach students how to write all the lowercase letters, typically 80% of what's on the page for a student is all lowercase letters. So there's a direct connection there. That connection starts to become a lot more difficult for students when they start to get into cursive. So, in other words, if they are learning, let's say, the letter S in cursive, that isn't necessarily how the letter S is represented when they're reading, unless they happen to be reading in cursive, I guess. So, when you're talking about if you have a struggling reader, or let's say or particularly at the early elementary grades, to me, it would make sense, at least from the research studies that I'm familiar with, would be to prioritize print. So to print the letters.
That is super interesting. Wow.
Yeah.
So maybe not to skip the handwriting instruction component, just maybe work on the letter formation and make sure that everybody's solid
in
in their
print
printing
first.
skills, maybe.
Again, because it would just go with the idea on, because again, if you're making the direct connection between them learning how to write the letter and it being able to help them read the letter, it would have to be a similar formation. Unfortunately, some of the cursive letters look vastly different than how they're presented in print.
Faith, your eyeballs are lighting up. Is there something going on?
Well, yeah, this is coming from a senior person.
I knew this was coming.
I'm sorry. I feel so strongly that the cursive is important and has been ignored for too long. I taught 3rd grade, and that was that big transition year when children learned how to write in script. And years ago, the second half of 3rd grade was spent writing in script so that you wouldn't forget what you were taught. Today, if they write in script, they just learn letters and then they don't have to use it, so it's useless. They forget about it. But when we taught script, they actually had to use it and write everything in script. Why do I think this is important? Because when letters are connected, that adds to fluency in writing. And when you don't have to pick your pen up and down, and it reduces reversals. And I'm sorry, I just am really on board with spending the time. There should be time to learn cursive. That's, again, my feeling.
Interesting.
And as far, wait, and I have one more thing to say. When you were talking about spending the time with older students on handwriting, or are you just being a pain in the neck about letter formation? I tell you, I've worked with older students. It has changed their lives, because when you
but Faith, is what you're saying, to just like keep being that annoying
I'm
bird
not
in their
going to
ear?
be annoying, start at the top, but I am going to impress upon kids that they need to, whether it's in print or cursive, they have to form their letters correctly in order to get a message down fluently, and it reduces cognitive overload in so many ways. So that's I myself.
That's food for thought. I think that I see both of your point of views, but I thought that what Shawn mentioned was very interesting. That point that when kids are reading, I never thought of that point before, that when they're reading, they're not reading script, they're reading print. That is, but I also get your point about fluency. So that one is one that I'm going to have to sleep on and just soul search and just, I don't know.
I should say I don't want to be seen as bashing cursive. I am a cursive believer. I'm one of the few. So I graduated high school now over a quarter century ago. But
You
I
didn't go
was
to
one
high
of
school
the.
in Brooklyn, did you?
I did not. No,
Okay.
just through PS200, and then I was one of the last graduating classes to where I had a typing class with the typewriters. I had to carry around a typing ribbon, and I remember my cursive lessons. I do think that there is value in cursive. I would be interesting, and I think as a research center, I think perhaps one of the important questions we can help answer is at what age what's the optimal age, quote unquote, that cursive can be introduced, and when can we really sort of maximize a student's reading writing development when it is introduced? Because I think there's some fascinating questions regarding the value of not only the value of handwriting instruction, but what that handwriting instruction looks like. So, for instance, in the state of Iowa, excuse me, they just released new academic standards. So we basically followed in the state of Iowa. We followed the Common Core standards, and then they adopted something called the Iowa Core, and then they just revised the Iowa Core just I think about 4 weeks ago, and it calls for the introduction of cursive writing starting in second grade, going through third, going through fourth, and I think that that's a welcome addition. I think sort of like what you said, Faith. I think that handwriting in whatever form it is has become one of the forgotten R's in public schools. And I think the more focus that can be drawn upon it, I think it'll only help students.
So let's talk a little bit about your role now as director. I'm interested in knowing what are some of your personal goals that you would like to see happen, and what needs to go and what should be added in.
Yeah, no, thanks for that question. I have two kids. I have a wonderful 7-year old, wonderful 2-year old, and I think that once you start to have your own kids, you can't really help but sort of take a long view on your own childhood and sort of things that shaped you. Because one of the beautiful things I think about being a father is your kids just sort of have their own little personalities to where you can't really quite tell where the things came from, and then there's certain things where you're like, oh, that's something that I would do. um, but when I think about just my own personal history with literacy, I mentioned that my mom and her family immigrated to New York City in 1970, and so she came from China, and so she knew Cantonese and Toishanese. Those aren't main dialects by any means, and in China, majority of people speak Mandarin. So when she started in high school in Brooklyn, she struggled to finish high school. There wasn't such thing as English language learning services in the early '70s. My mom's she is the toughest person I've ever met in my entire life. So, um, she's very outgoing. I can't barely get a word in whenever I talk with her. That's the time. She's just very personable. And then but I've sort of seen what sort of struggles with literacy mean to just your day to day and your career. So she works as a waitress, and then she's also a hairdresser, and so those are tips based industries, and just that can be a very precarious way to make a living. So that was something that I sort of looking back on that is
Just have
really.
to tell you, my
Yeah.
mother was a waitress too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you and I.
Right, exactly.
Love affair that's going on online. I feel left out, but I'm from Brooklyn and I like pizza.
Yeah. But so looking back on that, I was like, oh wow, that really shaped sort of my own personal beliefs and just the amazing responsibility we have as American adults to sort of make sure that kids and I use kids even with high schoolers. Kids have access to high quality reading instruction, and then I grew up in Brooklyn, and my mom's side of the family. There were some weeks to where I wouldn't hear English, so I would just hear Cantonese, and then I grew up in Bensonhurst, so I had sort of this really unique Chinese, sort of Italian Brooklyn accent when I was growing up, and then when we moved to Ohio, none of my teachers could understand me, so I became very anxious reading out loud, and I received special education services for speech language, and I think that
I'm shocked.
yeah,
You don't
yeah.
have the Brooklyn accent that I have.
I lost it. I
How
feel
did you
sad
do
about
that?
losing that. Yeah.
Yeah. You're
I
so
feel sad.
articulate and well spoken. I would never
Oh, thanks.
ever suspect that you ever had a issue
Yeah.
with communicating. That's
Particularly, sort of like the classic RL and Chinese dialect. I really struggled with, and then just sort of looking back at that too, I was just like, oh wow, that really informed my own sort of personal thoughts on just how critical these early literacy skills are. And then after I got my master's degree in special education, I was first generation college student, so I thought I was sort of on borrowed money, so to speak. I was lucky enough to attend on a scholarship as a master's student, and then so I on a whim, really, I moved down to New Orleans, Louisiana, when the natural disaster Hurricane Katrina happened in 2005, and then so I was lucky enough to work with some amazing people there to a very small part of helping sort of restart the school system down there after that. And then so many of my students struggled with reading and writing that I said, oh wow, this is an American problem. It's just not. I thought it was just like, oh, when you grow up in sort of New York and sort of first generation immigrant households, like this is some things, but really impressed upon me just how much of a national responsibility it is. So I've made it sort of my life's work, professional work, to study not only evidence-based literacy practices, particularly reading, writing, but what are different assessments that we can help teachers administer and help understand to drive their own practice. So what that means for my priorities as director here is that I think that we can do very high quality research. There are not many of state funded reading centers out there. I can name them all on one hand. So I feel very fortunate to be in this position to sort of help shape what are important questions, to talk with people, to really understand what are sort of the high lever activities that we can engage in research. That would be one. Two would be technical assistance to schools. Um, I can't tell you. There are many vivid memories. I'm sure that you both have them, or your first year of teaching, to where I was like, oh wow, I would not do that again. This lesson exploded in my face, so to speak. And then so I think that there's teachers out there that feel that way, and I think that there's a way that we can help be national leaders on recognizing the important profession of teaching, and at the same time recognize that this, as a part of any profession, there needs to be mechanisms to where you continue your professional development. That as research changes, if we are science of reading with a capital S teachers, that means that the evidence base is going to continue to change and evolve. And when you think about it from that perspective, I think that reading centers can fill such a important role in helping teachers continue their practice. And then the third thing that we do would be sort of more translation or dissemination, to where we talk. We talk. So we talk at libraries. We talk at conferences. We produce online content that hopefully gets shared. We develop products. So there are different things that I think that research centers are really well positioned to do, and so I'm very lucky to have some wonderful staff here and to be housed at the University of Iowa. Sorry, that was a very long answer.
No, so cool. I think Judy was itching to give you a cheer. So Judy, unmute yourself. Let's give Shawn big cheers.
And it's funny. usually ask some funny questions, and one of the questions is Starbucks or Dunkin'. I don't have to ask Shawn because I definitely see that he's loving his Dunkin' today. Nice, nice. What's in that coffee cup, Shawn?
I can't, I had to give up sugar because I drink so much coffee that I would have some sugar issues. So it's just an iced coffee. I usually switch to iced coffee in the afternoon, and then I'm a hot pot in the morning. But
Interesting. Faith, can I ask Shawn 2 questions?
Sure.
All right. So what are your recommendations in terms of the types of paper that kids are writing on? I see, there's college ruled paper, and then there's paper that have different color lines. Any professional recommendations, especially as kids shift to older grades? Some of them still haven't, mastered great handwriting. Are we shifting to these college ruled papers too fast? And then the other one will be about, I have to confess something. When I do foundations instruction, the handwriting component is the scariest for me because it's so wordy, and I have to hold my cue card, start at the skyline, go down to the grass line, and I'm looking. Is that a lot for some kids? And am I the only one that gets freaked out when I see so many directions?
I'll answer the second one first. No, you're not alone with that. I think that what we know from just research on explicit direct instruction is that instructional language needs to be clear, consistent, concise. So I've seen some very wordy handwriting lessons. What I mean by that is I've seen like start the H at the top of the line and then cross the middle line and touch the bottom line, and then I'm not even sure we need to unpack all that vocabulary. I think that that's where the show and tell comes into play. Your first question, Judy, I think that there is some interesting things out there regarding the types of materials students use. I will say that at early elementary grades, the successful or evidence-based handwriting curriculum, they tend to use sort of those wider lines with the dotted line in the middle. So at least from that recommendation, there seems to be some method there that allows students a little perhaps more ease, perhaps more visual motor coordination. There is something there to that, but what that gradual release looks like in terms of like, do you start off with this wide and then slowly shrink? I think that that's an important area of inquiry. I'm not really aware of of really great research that looks at that. I will say that if your student who's older, if you have older students who are struggling with handwriting, to me that would make sense to try to increase and go to not the college ruled, but the wide ruled, to give them more opportunity to practice staying within the margins.
So, Shawn, I have a couple of questions for you. What do you think of chalkboards? Vertical chalkboards, on an easel or on a wall.
Yeah. I love them.
Me too. I was
Yeah.
hoping you would.
Yeah, I think that, there is something to be said for, particularly in handwriting instruction, a really attention grabbing, but clear, consistent, concise model of what the letter looks like. And I think that, chalkboards, unpopular opinion, and I know I'm showing my age here, but chalkboards get the job done. So they check off all those boxes. From like a fiscal perspective, chalk is much cheaper than this dry erase business we have going on. And so I think that all things being equal, I think that as schools have to really think hard about their budgets, chalkboard I think just makes sense in a lot of ways.
I could tell you, look, I use dry erase boards now all the time, but I taught when we used chalk.
Chalk,
sorry, chalk has a pull to it, right? You can feel it. There's this connection with it. And also you could give them small pieces of chalk So it reduces the amount above it. So they really get a nice pincer grip. And standing up by a chalkboard really helps stabilize the body across the midline. I am a huge fan of stand-up chalkboards. I will absolutely be getting that for my new baby grandson when he's old enough, because
All right, so now I know, because I told Faith I'm gonna send the baby a gift. Maybe you'll text me which chalkboard I have to invest. Even though I don't like chalkboards and I definitely prefer dry erase, I think the new baby needs a nice chalkboard and some chalk. Oh my God, I sucked at using chalk as a teacher. I sucked at it. I have flashbacks. It never came out dark enough, and then the line looked weird. Oh,
well,
One of my go-to moves, so I struggled academically when I was a young student, and one of my go-to moves was that if I get called to the chalkboard, I would try to make such a mess that it looked like I worked really it looked like I worked really hard, even though it was completely wrong. But I would just have chalk all over me, and then so I thought at the very least I would get style points for like, oh, Shawn worked hard on this. So
and last question, what about golf size pencils? So that was a biggie with handwriting without tears. I was trained in that a long time ago, and they said for the same reason, using the little mini golf pencils reduce the amount of pencil on top to really help with a pincer grip. Your thoughts on that?
and I'm going to say something kind of provocative, I guess, is that the
the
research
literacy view
suggests.
loves provocative, Shawn.
Okay, that's very good. So I the different things that we can do for students, like from pencil grips, there's like the larger pencils, there's smaller pencils, there's light up pencils, there's mechanical pencils. There isn't really convincing evidence to suggest that that really improves students' legibility that much. I think the big issue that those are all trying to solve would be one, student motivation, that, oh, this is kind of neat. But then two, it's hand fatigue. So hand fatigue tends to be a lot more detrimental to overall handwriting than any sort of mechanism or different thing that we can provide students. And I know
What about
that
those pencil grips?
there isn't really convincing things to suggest that would help. Now, if you look at surveys of students, they think it's cool, and I've seen kids light up over getting a cool pencil grip that with like a neon color, and things like that. But I think the issue is actually hand fatigue, and not necessarily how students what the pencil looks like, the pencil grip, etc.
Interesting, because there are pencil grips where you could put the fingers into the right position. And I've seen kids actually learn to hold a pencil, the pencil grip is removed. And these are kids who did not want to use a pencil grip. It was not enticing. But by enforcing it, they learned how to hold the pencil, and then that came off, and then they were able to hold a regular pencil without a pencil grip. Let's talk a little bit about your new lifter. So that just came out yesterday, correct?
It came out on Friday, so it's been a couple
Breaking
days at least.
news.
So let's hear it.
Yeah, so we're thrilled, myself and another faculty member here at University of Iowa, Dr. Derek Rogers. We approached the Iowa Reading Research Center before I was a director and said, we think that we can create something that's research-based that would help teachers provide supplemental handwriting instruction that aligns to their early reading curriculum. So in my prior research presentations, my partnerships with schools, I've had schools say, oh, that makes so much sense. We want to do some sort of handwriting thing. Unfortunately, they kept running into a problem is that their early reading curriculum would follow a certain scope and sequence of letters. So, for instance, let's say if the first three letters are s, t, those first three letters, they might choose a handwriting curriculum where those three letters aren't introduced until, let's say, lesson 30 or something like that. And then three totally different letters could be introduced in handwriting. So what ends up happening is that early elementary grade teachers who are trying to do right by their students by providing explicit early reading instruction, and then also providing explicit handwriting instruction, ended up causing confusion for their students. Students would have to try to learn competing scopes and sequences of different letters. So what we did is that we partnered with the Iowa Reading Research Center and we created Lifter. Lifter is a mouthful, but it's a cute acronym that stands for letter identification. So that's the reading skills of saying the name and then also the sound. Letter identification and formation. So that's forming the handwriting letters for transcription and early reading. And that is an online website that has two components. One is that has a free e-learning module for caregivers, parents, guardians, teachers, administrators, to where they can learn about the research underpinning effective handwriting instruction, but then also make clear, hopefully more clear, the strong connection between handwriting and early reading. So that's one. You can complete the e-learning module in under 30 minutes, but I think there's some great information there. Two, the second thing is that there is a free web application that teachers, caregivers can log on and then click different letters. So let's say again that your early reading curriculum introduces t. You can go on, click and t on the website and click see materials, and it will create PDF downloadable handwriting activities that specifically align to your early reading curriculum. Those materials feature research-based practices. One would be visual cues. So it has those visual. So it's not a picture mnemonic, but it provides dotted lines. It shows the arrow on the direction of the letter stroke, and then it also has the number sequence of where you start. So we have that for all lower and uppercase letters. Two, it also provides memory retrieval activities to where, because the ultimate idea behind, I think one of the ultimate ideas behind why handwriting can improve reading is that you're providing opportunities for students to commit to memory what the letter looks like. So what that means practically is that there are different handwriting activities that use such things as cover, copy, compare, to where you take a look at what the letter looks like with visual cues, you cover that up, you try to copy it from memory, and then you compare. So you're basically creating these opportunities to where students need to memorize the shape, say the name. And then third is that there's explicit instruction baked in. So there's teacher scripts, fidelity checklists, and then there's also accompanying videos to where we have videos that teachers can project on their smartboard or their computer, their tablet, that shows the models of the letter formation. You can hear models of the letter name, also the letter sound, and then finally it uses the letter name, letter sound in a word. So for instance, when a student's learning "ol" lamp or "ol" L, and then it'll combine into lamp. So the L will turn into a lamp. Again, it's just trying to drive home that important connection between writing and reading. And this is a free application. So anybody, we've gotten feedback all the way from Australia of people downloading this. So you can log on. We have this is the result of from a generous private donor that provided us funds to be able to create this for free for everybody.
That's amazing. That is wonderful. And it's great that it's available to everyone. Do they have to put in an email address to access it? Is that the way they sign up?
Yeah, so that we do ask, and then you don't have to give us the email if you don't want to. We just collect it, so then that way we're already at work on Lifter 2.0. We're trying to create an overlay of spelling as well, because I think there is, again, the natural connection is handwriting, reading, and spelling. So we're trying to do a similar thing with that. But so yeah, once you log on, you'll see an awkward video of myself and Derek introducing Lifter, and then it asks, we can keep you up to date by providing your email, but it is free. It's completely free for anybody out there.
Judy, any questions?
Comment.
Comments?
Shawn, you are the coolest. I think you are definitely Literacy View No BS bestie. Faith told me you were a great guy. You are greater than I even imagined. You are so fun. You are so passionate. so down to earth. And I think that the fact that you guys are offering something that's free is incredible, because I think right now in education, everybody thinks that you got to pay big bucks to get good stuff. And that's not the case. Look at you, something that's free, something that instructionally is free. And you guys are even pushing it to the next level to take it from just being a handwriting instruction tool to also tackle the pillar of phonics and spelling. That's fantastic. I know that this is a podcast, so some of our viewers listen instead of watch, but can you model for me and talk it out? What's the perfect way to hold a pencil?
Oh no. I'm going to
Isn't that
completely
Faith,
cop out
isn't
on
that
this,
a great
Judy, and
question?
say that the perfect way is however you're holding the pencil and is comfortable to you. And is comfortable to you.
The only reason I'm asking is because I give kids feedback all the time, and I
Yeah.
want to make sure that the feedback that I'm providing, because I've seen kids hold pencils like a shovel,
Oh yeah, me too.
like they're scooping sand.
Yeah.
So like any
I th-
tips on what to tell a kid when you're telling them how to hold it?
I think Faith is right on the money there. I think that pincer grip of sort of holding it to where it's resting on your middle finger, but then it's also neatly squeezed between your thumb and your pointer finger. I think that's how I've typically seen it defined in different research studies. But again, it's
You know,
I
I'm
you know
gonna screenshot and snip it to what you just did and stare at it. You're gonna go right into my garage literacy station, and I'm gonna see a nice picture of you doing that to remind
As
me. That's
long as
awesome.
it's functional.
right,
So,
exactly.
obviously that's the ideal, but there are kids who could write well, and it's not the tripod, typical grip that's taught, but it's functional. If it gets in the way of writing fluently, then it's an issue. But as long as it's functional, that's the main thing. That's at least what I was always told.
Completely
And my
agree.
last question for you, Shawn. You moved away from Brooklyn. How'd you get to Iowa? And what do you miss most about Brooklyn?
So much I miss about Brooklyn. I miss the New York Knicks. I miss Yankee Stadium. I miss the wonderful community. I think that there's something. So my mom's a 5-foot Chinese woman, and my dad's a 6'3" redheaded Irishman. And I'm not sure how many places in the world that can happen.
I love it. I
Yeah.
absolutely love it. Now, you know what? Honestly, Brooklyn is dear to my heart, and it's because we had diversity.
Yeah. Right.
And, you grow up with diversity, and you accept people, and it's just a great place. So thank you so much for this lively, wonderful conversation. We so much appreciate it. Did we forget to ask you anything that you would like to mention, Shawn?
No, thank you, Faith and Judy, for doing the work that you're doing. I think that one of the big ways that that we can help contribute to the national conversation and also teach professional development is just having these kinds of conversations and sort of leaving appetizers for people to follow up. So I think that would be one. And then two, if anybody's interested, besides the literacy lifter, we have different free things on our website. If you just go to iowareadingresearch.com, we not only have that free lifter application, we also have additional e-learning modules related to things like dyslexia, science of reading 101, et cetera, that we'd be more than happy for anybody to check out. But thank you again for having me. It's been a delight.
That's great information. Thank you. Thank you so much for joining us. And thank you for reaching out and wanting to be on the show. We are honored that this actually was initiated on your end. And I love that, because we're just honored when researchers think that our show is the place to be for where they're going to get the no BS answer. So thank you so much. Judy, why don't you wrap up?
All right, follow us on Facebook and join our group, the Real Teachers Letting Loose Facebook Literacy View group. Follow us also on our website, theliteracyview.com. We have new sections coming soon, advertising with the Literacy View. If you're a publisher, that's not who we're looking for. Details will follow. What else? Follow us on YouTube, The Literacy View. Faith is on Twitter. You know where to find us. Instagram, The Literacy View. And our numbers are growing. The best thing you could do is share what we're doing with your friends, and also reach out to us. Let us know what you're thinking. We're getting a lot of comments, a lot of feedback, a lot of people asking to be on our show, and we're loving it. We're loving it. So we're changing lives one view at a time. Thank you, Shawn.
Sharing is caring. All right, we're wrapping up. Have a good night.